Hello, Internet. I wanted to talk about something a little bit heavier today. So I decided to come sit out on my deck, enjoy the last bit of summer before it's gray and rainy in Portland for the next 8 months or so. It's beautiful out today. I really needed to get outside. I have some plants. I'll show you guys my plants at the end of the video, maybe. But today I wanted to talk about violence and what its place in our modern society is. And I've thought about this a lot throughout my life, but I've really come to the conclusion that it seems like violence is an unfortunate necessity for any sort of radical change in any society, no matter what you believe, honestly. But in my thought process and sifting through how I feel and kind of trying to figure out like exactly what that means to me, I had to come to the honest conclusion that I am a nonviolent person, and I don't personally believe that violence is the answer. So I kind of wanted to just talk about that and sift through it a little bit more today. Um, so I used to be very pro-violence against people that I disagreed with. Specifically like the police. Now, I still am anti-police. I'm still, not somebody that will ever support, the police because I think that they're a very corrupt, to say the least, and I think that they are beyond reform. But you know, I don't want to kill anybody. I don't want anyone to have to die. I don't want anyone to die. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want that to be something that has to happen. And that's not something that I want to personally, proliferate. Truck's really loud. I don't know if you guys are going to hear it. I have the noise canceling on, but whatever. I'm outside. It is what it is. And that was something that was actually kind of a hard conclusion for me to come to. And it was actually difficult for me to admit that to myself because I've always been a very radical person. I tend to be sort of on the left side of the spectrum, just empathy, workers' rights, human rights, all that normal stuff that I perceive as normal. Um, but I try to be as honest as I can, and I try not to adapt myself to any specific ideology because I think that once you decide you are a certain ideology, a lot of conscious thought kind of goes out the window. And I really try to make all of my decisions consciously. I really try to come to all of my conclusions consciously. I'm obviously not perfect, but that is something that I am very adamant about. And I think that's very important. So, the narrative right now in America specifically, but really in the world, is that, you know, violence is kind of the norm, and it's sort of expected for you to celebrate the death of people that you disagree with. And, I'm not going to empathize with the death of someone who has caused harm to people that I care about, but I'm also not going to celebrate it because I just don't think that more violence and more death is going to benefit us in the long run. And again, I know that's not necessarily like a popular take to have right now. Um, and I don't normally like to get into this kind of stuff on my channel, but the whole point of my channel is to just document what I'm thinking about on a weekly basis and, kind of archive my brain for my own reference in the future and just for anyone else who wants to, is interested. And this is something that's been on my mind for the past 2 weeks or so. So I kind of have to make a video about it. But yeah, I think I don't want to seem like I'm empathizing with the opposition either, because that's not the case. But I think a lot of people say things that they don't mean. And this is something that I myself have also done. Part of what I was talking about, like anti-cop stuff. I used to be on the internet like, 8 years ago talking about wanting, the police to die and they shouldn't exist, and hoping for the death of people that I disagreed with, but knowing deep down in myself that I would never actually do that myself. So, you know, that's not something that I want to attach myself to because I'm not being honest. Like, I think a lot of people are celebrating death and they themselves would not ever create death for themselves. And I think that's a bit hypocritical. And I think it's a bit, it's a form of virtue signaling, you know? Like, you're just trying to get cool points with your side by saying that you want these people to die. And I really don't think that that is a good direction for us to be going in general as a society. But personally, I think more people should just say the things that they actually believe. And, if people disagree with you, then be ready to defend yourself and stand on your beliefs. And, my honest belief is that I don't like violence. I'm terrified of guns. Like, I don't own a gun. I would love to learn how to use a gun so that I have those skills. And, I want to get a baseball bat to have in my apartment, just in case, because God forbid something happens. Like, that's something that I can see myself having to do just in case. But that's probably the extent of it, to be honest. Like, I don't want to own a gun because I'm terrified of them. And I don't want to ever have to use a gun. And again, I know some people don't agree with that. And I don't personally like guns, but I do think that in the context of the world we live in, people should be able to have guns. But that doesn't mean that it's okay to use them liberally. I live in Oregon, so it's pretty easy to get a gun out here. But I also live in Portland, so it's a pretty progressive city. It's a very progressive city. So yeah, I think the main thing that I want to get across in this video is really think about what you believe and really think about the things that you say publicly or even in conversations with your friends, and really question, like, do you mean what you're saying, or are you just saying it because you think that's what you're supposed to believe? A lot of people who are not religious will criticize people who are religious because they're just like adopting a set of beliefs and not questioning them, and then just kind of evangelizing those beliefs to everybody in their lives. But I think a lot of people do that same thing, even if they're not religious, just with their own beliefs. And like I said before, once you adopt an ideology, you kind of throw conscious thought out the window because you're told this is what you believe now. This is part of your identity. And that's just not something that I can get behind. And that's not something that I can agree with. And that's not something that I think is helpful. I think ideology is good for like a reference point. And, obviously people that adopt an ideology, they were attracted to it for a reason. It's because there's parts of it that they feel like are correct and that they're passionate about. But you still have to think for yourself. You still have to have your own conscious thoughts and your own personal beliefs. And I just think that that's something that's not very common in society right now, especially on the internet. There's very little discernment. There's very little individuality in thought. And this is all a product of, authoritarianism and fascism, where everything just gets neutralized and there's no individuality is not celebrated. And it's scary to stand out from the pack because socially people need their community, and if you take a stand against your own community with your own beliefs that are different from theirs, that can be a form of social suicide. That can be very harmful, and it can make it harder for you to exist, and it can make it harder for you to survive if you are isolated from your community. So I understand why it happens, but I do think that we should all collectively try to move away from that and try to think for ourselves and use that as a starting point. I'm not saying you should like ignore everybody else and say everyone else is wrong, even if you disagree with them. There is push and pull to all of this, and there is a need to concede in certain aspects so that you can build community, you know? But do it on your terms. Don't do it on an ideological term. Do it on your own terms and build the community that you want, and build community with people that you want to be around. If you're around people that you don't like and that you don't resonate with and you don't want to be around, then try to figure out a way to get out of that. I know it's hard, but like I think it's just a necessary evil. Is like sorry, ideology seems like a necessary evil, but building community is not evil. I kind of said that wrong. I just wanted to clarify. But yeah, I think that's about all I have to say regarding that. So let me know what you guys think. I would love to hear all of your opinions. Because I'm not saying I'm right either, and I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I'm trying to have you change your own mind if you need to. So yeah, since I'm starting to do different things with my channel, I'm outside right now. I've been kind of slowly getting into growing some plants. I have 2 cherry tomato plants and I have 2 chili pepper plants. So I just kind of want to show you guys my plants real quick. So I got these 2 plants right here. I don't want to turn it around, but this one right now just has this one real nice looking cherry tomato. Can I focus that? I don't know. I don't like cherry tomatoes personally, so I'm going to give that to my partner. But I got those plants for free. And then my chili peppers are my pride and joy right now. So check these out. Oh man, they look so good on camera too. Some of them are like about ready to pick too. I got these down here. I got about 15 to 20 right now. This plant isn't blooming as much. Like you can see that, there's not as many. I got one good one right here. This one's like good to go. Where is it? This one here. This one's like ready to go. But yeah, I just wanted to show you guys that. All right, that's it for this video. I'll see you next week.